Welcome to Verified Souls. There's a moment every experienced hiker recognizes when the forest stops feeling indifferent and starts feeling aware. That subtle shift when you know you should leave, but you don't. In Arizona's remote wilderness, that hesitation has consequences. Tonight, 9 people ignored that instinct. They stayed 1 hour too long, 1 night past safety, 1 observation beyond reason. And something in those forests was waiting for exactly that. The question isn't whether these mountains are dangerous. It's what they become when you refuse to leave. From canyon walls that breathe to ravens that spell your future, these accounts share one thread. They all knew the moment they should have run. They just couldn't make themselves move. If you want to hear what waits in Arizona's deepest forests for those who overstay their welcome, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Because once you start listening, you won't be able to leave either. Let's begin with story 1, Oak Creek Canyon. The breathing started on night 3. I arrived at Oak Creek Canyon on a Tuesday in late September, when the tourist crowds had thinned and the forest belonged to the creatures again. My assignment was simple: document the nocturnal behavior of endangered bat species for a conservation nonprofit. 6 nights, high-sensitivity audio equipment, infrared cameras mounted at 3 different elevations. I'd done this work dozens of times. I knew how to be invisible in the wilderness, how to let the night unfold around me without interference. The first night was textbook perfect. I set up my base camp a 1/4 mile from the main trail, deep enough for privacy but close enough to bail if weather turned. My audio recorders were positioned at 50-yard intervals, leading into the canyon's throat, a narrow limestone corridor where the bats emerged at dusk. I sat in my tent reviewing footage until midnight, listening through headphones to the symphony of nocturnal Arizona, rustling pinyon pines, distant coyote conversations, the leathery whisper of bat wings cutting through darkness. Then I heard it, so faint I almost missed it beneath the ambient noise. A low, rhythmic sound, steady, organic, like someone drawing a massive breath, holding it, releasing it slowly. I checked my equipment. No mechanical issues, no wind patterns that could create that resonance. I marked the timestamp and kept listening. 20 seconds of inhalation, 10 seconds of pause, 20 seconds of exhalation, perfectly regular, perfectly wrong. I told myself it was geological. Caves breathe sometimes, pressure differentials, air moving through limestone chambers. I'd read about it. This canyon was riddled with unmapped caverns. That's what I wrote in my field notes that night. Geological phenomenon, likely cave system. Worth investigating further. Professional curiosity, nothing more. The second night, I moved one of my recorders deeper into the canyon. I wanted to isolate the source. The breathing was louder on playback, clearer. I could hear texture now, not just the movement of air, but something beneath it. A wetness, the sound of moisture in a throat. I sat there in my tent at 2 a.m, headphones on, listening to something that sounded increasingly less like wind through rock and more like respiration. Living respiration. And here's what made my hands start shaking. It had rhythm variations, subtle ones, like sleep breathing, sometimes deeper, sometimes shallower, never stopping. I should have left then. I know that now. But I'm a scientist. I've spent my entire adult life explaining the unexplainable, finding rational answers for things that seem impossible. So I stayed. I told myself I'd give it 1 more night, document it properly, maybe discover something genuinely novel about canyon acoustics. Night 3 changed everything. I was reviewing audio around 11 when I noticed something in my own breathing. I'd been sitting still for an hour, completely focused on the playback, and I'd unconsciously matched my rhythm to the sound in my headphones. Inhale for 20 seconds. Pause. Exhale for 20 seconds. I hadn't realized I was doing it until my chest started aching from the extended breath holds. I ripped the headphones off, sat there in the sudden silence of my tent, forcing myself to breathe normally. Fast, shallow breaths, breaking the pattern. My heart was hammering, because that's not how unconscious mimicry works. You don't accidentally synchronize with a sound that requires conscious effort to maintain. 20-second breath holds aren't natural. They're not something your body just does. But I'd been doing it. For how long? How many times had I synced up without noticing? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my tent with the audio equipment off, trying to breathe normally, trying not to listen to the canyon, but I could still hear it. Faintly. Through the tent fabric. Through the night air. That steady, patient breathing. And worse, I could feel my body wanting to match it. Like a song stuck in your head, but in your lungs, in your diaphragm. An itch I couldn't scratch except by surrendering to that rhythm. By dawn, I'd made my decision, pack up, leave, file my report remotely. I'd gotten enough bat footage for the nonprofit. This was exactly the kind of situation where you trust your instincts and extract yourself. I'd been in dangerous wildlife situations before, close calls with bears, aggressive elk during rut. I knew when to respect my fear, but when I tried to break down my camp that morning, I couldn't do it. Not because something stopped me, because my body wouldn't cooperate. Every time I held my breath to focus on a task, pulling tent stakes, coiling cables, any precise movement, I'd automatically fall into that 20-second rhythm. And once I was in it, I couldn't make myself stop. I'd stand there, tent stake in hand, breathing in perfect sync with the canyon, unable to exhale until the rhythm allowed it. It took me 4 hours to pack what should have taken 30 minutes, and by then, I'd already decided I wasn't leaving. Not yet, because I needed to understand what was happening to me, what was happening to my body. This was beyond acoustics, beyond psychology. This was something interfacing directly with my autonomic nervous system. Night 4. I stopped fighting it. I set up my most sensitive microphone array and positioned myself at the canyon's narrowest point, where the breathing was loudest. I sat cross-legged on bare rock and consciously, deliberately, synced my breathing to the sound. 20 seconds in, 10-second hold, 20 seconds out. Within minutes, something shifted. The breathing, the canyon's breathing, it responded, deepened, slowed slightly, like it was acknowledging me, like it had been waiting for me to stop resisting. And then I felt it. Not heard it. Felt it. A presence. Vast. Ancient. Not in the canyon, but of the canyon. The limestone walls themselves were alive with it. Every crack, every crevice, every hidden chamber was part of one massive respiratory system. And I was breathing with it. My lungs were synchronized with something that had been breathing since before humans walked upright. Something that had patience measured in geological time. I don't know how long I sat there. Hours, maybe longer. Time dissolved into inhalation and exhalation. I became aware of things I shouldn't have been able to sense. Water moving through aquifers 50 feet below. Root systems breathing oxygen into soil. The metabolic respiration of stone itself, so slow it was nearly imperceptible. I was connected to all of it, part of the canyon's vast, slow circulation. When I finally stood up, the sky was starting to pale. I'd sat there all night. My legs were numb, my lips were cracked, but I felt calm. More calm than I'd ever felt in my life, because I finally understood. The canyon wasn't hunting me. It was teaching me, showing me what it meant to breathe with the world instead of just in it. I packed my equipment that morning with perfect efficiency, every movement synchronized with my breath, every breath synchronized with the canyon. I hiked out in a state of absolute presence, no scattered thoughts, no anxiety, just breath and movement and the ancient rhythm underlying everything. I've been back in the city for 3 months now. I filed my report, delivered my bat footage, resumed my normal life, but I haven't stopped breathing the canyon's rhythm. 20 seconds in, 10-second hold, 20 seconds out. I do it without thinking now. While I'm working, while I'm driving, while I'm falling asleep. My body refuses any other pattern. My doctor says I'm developing bradycardia, abnormally slow heart rate. My resting pulse is 38 beats per minute. She's concerned, wants to run cardiac tests. But I'm not worried. My heart is just adapting to the truth the canyon taught me. That human breathing is frantic, panicked. We gasp at life like we're drowning. The canyon breathes the way ancient things breathe. With patience, with purpose, with the confidence of something that will still be breathing long after everything else has turned to dust. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear it. Not through walls or windows, through my own chest. The canyon is still breathing, and so am I, together, synchronized. And the strangest part, the part I haven't told anyone, is that I can feel others now. Not many, but a few. People whose breathing matches mine in crowded spaces, in grocery stores, in traffic. Our eyes meet, and we both know. We're all breathing with the canyon now. It's spreading, slowly, patient as stone, one breath at a time. And someday, maybe not in my lifetime, but someday, everyone will breathe the way the canyon breathes, the way we were always meant to breathe. And the world will finally be quiet, finally be calm, finally be in sync with what's been breathing beneath us all along. I'm going back next month. The canyon is calling, not with sound, with breath. And I need to go deeper this time. I need to find the center, the source, the original lung, because I'm not finished learning. I've only just begun to understand what it means to truly breathe, and I can't wait to teach others. I've been a ham radio operator for 17 years, and I've heard a lot of strange things on the airwaves. Number stations, coded military transmissions. Once, I even picked up what I'm pretty sure was a submarine surfacing off the California coast, but I'd never received a distress call from the future until I went hiking in the Blue Range Primitive area. It was supposed to be a simple trip. 5 days, solo, no cell service, just me and the wilderness. My ex-husband got the house in the divorce, and I got the freedom to disappear into places where nobody could find me. I'd been looking forward to it for months. The Blue Range is some of the most remote country in Arizona, true backcountry, where you can hike for days without seeing another human. Perfect for someone who needed to remember what silence felt like. I brought my portable ham radio setup. Old habit. I've never gone anywhere without it. Most people don't understand the appeal, but there's something profound about being alone in the wilderness and still being connected to voices from around the world. Late at night, you can pick up conversations from Australia, Japan, ships in the middle of the Pacific. It makes the loneliness feel intentional instead of accidental. The first 2 days were exactly what I needed. I hiked during the day, set up camp before dark, spent my evenings scanning frequencies and logging contacts. On the second night, I was tuned to a quiet band, just listening to the static, when I caught a fragment of something. A voice, male, distressed. The signal was weak and kept cutting out, but I managed to isolate the frequency. It was 7.2233 MHz, an abandoned frequency that hasn't had regular traffic in decades. I grabbed my notebook and started copying down what I could hear. The voice was giving coordinates, repeating them urgently, then instructions, something about a tree, something about digging. The signal would surge and fade, but I caught enough to piece together the message. He was saying to dig where the tree bled, to find what was buried there before nightfall, to not make the same mistake he made. Then he gave a date, September 27th, and my blood went cold. Because today was September 24th. The broadcast I was receiving was dated 3 days in the future. I sat there in my tent staring at my radio, trying to rationalize it. Time zones, misheard dates, equipment malfunction. But I'd copied the coordinates clearly. I'd heard the desperation in that voice. And when I plotted the coordinates on my map, they pointed to a location less than 4 miles from my current position. Due east, deeper into the wilderness, in a section of forest I'd planned to explore tomorrow anyway. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the radio on, hoping the voice would come back, but the frequency stayed silent. Just static. Just the empty hiss of dead air. By morning, I'd convinced myself it was a prank. Some hiker with too much time and a twisted sense of humor, pre-recording a fake distress call and broadcasting it on an obscure frequency, hoping someone would bite. But I hiked toward those coordinates anyway. Because what if it wasn't a prank? What if someone really was in trouble? What if I was hearing a real emergency just displaced in time somehow? I know how that sounds. I'm not superstitious. I don't believe in time travel or premonitions. But I also couldn't ignore what I'd heard. It took me 6 hours to reach the area. The terrain got rougher as I went. Steep ravines, dense ponderosa pine, deadfall everywhere. I was starting to think I'd misplotted the coordinates when I saw it. A single ponderosa pine, massive and ancient, standing alone in a small clearing. And down one side of the trunk, a dark stain. It looked exactly like dried blood. I approached slowly. The stain started about chest height and ran down to the roots. When I got close enough to touch it, I realized it was sap. Just sap. Old, oxidized, dark red from years of exposure. But it looked enough like blood that anyone could make the mistake. This had to be the tree from the broadcast. I circled it, looking for any signs of disturbance. Recent digging, markings, anything. The ground around the base was undisturbed, natural. Whatever I was supposed to find here hadn't been buried yet, because it was still 3 days away from happening. Or not happening, or whatever impossible thing this was. I should have left, hiked back to my camp, gotten out of the Blue Range entirely, but instead I set up my tent right there in that clearing. I told myself I was just being thorough, documenting something unusual. But the truth is, I needed to know. I needed to understand what I'd heard and why I'd heard it. That night, I kept my radio on the same frequency, waiting. At exactly 11:47 p.m., the voice came back. Clearer this time, much clearer, and I recognized it immediately. The cadence, the breathing pattern, the slight rasp in the throat. It was my voice. I was listening to myself. 3 days in the future, giving coordinates to my current location, begging someone to dig where the tree bled, telling myself, not to make the same mistake. And then the transmission cut to static, and I was left sitting in the dark, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the microphone. I tried to respond, tried to transmit, but the frequency was dead. I was shouting into the void, asking myself what mistake I was going to make, what I needed to avoid, but there was no answer. Just that endless static. September 25th. I spent the entire day searching that clearing, looking for anything that would explain the broadcast. I dug around the tree's base with my camping trowel. I examined every inch of bark. I climbed up into the lower branches to see if something was hidden there. Nothing. The clearing was empty. The tree was just a tree. And I was losing my mind in the Arizona wilderness, chasing a radio signal from a future that might not even exist. But that night, the broadcast came again. My voice, more desperate. The same message, the same coordinates. And this time I noticed something I'd missed before. In the background of the transmission, beneath my future voice, there was another sound. Rhythmic, mechanical, like digging. Like a shovel hitting soil. Someone was digging while I was broadcasting. September 26th, 1 day before the date in the transmission. I couldn't eat, couldn't think straight. I just sat in that clearing, staring at the tree, waiting for something to happen, waiting for the timeline to catch up with itself. I'd stopped trying to rationalize it. I was caught in something, some loop, some temporal knot I couldn't untangle. That night, I heard myself scream. The broadcast came through at 11:47 p.m., like clockwork, but this time it was different. My voice was raw, terrified. I was still giving the coordinates, still saying to dig where the tree bled, but I was screaming it now, begging. And the digging sound in the background was louder, faster, frantic. Then the transmission cut out mid-sentence, and I was left in silence. September 27th, the day of the broadcast. I knew what I had to do. I had to break the loop. I had to not be here at 11:47 p.m. If I left now, hiked through the night, got far enough away from this clearing, maybe the broadcast wouldn't happen. Maybe I could change whatever future I'd been hearing. I started packing at dawn. Every movement felt wrong, like I was fighting against something. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just oppressive silence. I got my tent down, got my gear together, started walking back the way I'd come. But I couldn't find the trail. I'd marked it clearly when I arrived. Flagging tape every 100 yards, but the markers were gone, or moved. Every direction I walked led me in circles. Back to the clearing, back to that bleeding tree. I tried following the sun, tried using my compass. Nothing worked. The forest kept turning me around, kept bringing me back. By sunset, I was exhausted, defeated. I sat down at the base of the tree and accepted what was going to happen. I was going to be here at 11:47 p.m. I was going to send that broadcast. I was going to make whatever mistake my future self had been warning me about. The shovel was there when I looked down, lying in the dirt beside me. I hadn't brought a shovel. I had a camping trowel, a small hand tool, but this was a full-size spade. Clean, new, impossibly present. And I understood. The digging sound in the background of my transmissions, the frantic excavation. I was supposed to dig, not to find something, to bury something. I picked up the shovel, started digging at the base of the tree where the sap stain touched the ground. The soil was soft, easy, like it had been dug before, like it was expecting me. 3 feet down, I hit something solid, not rock, something that gave slightly under the blade, something wrapped in canvas. I didn't want to uncover it, but I couldn't stop. Myself. I cleared the soil away with my hands, pulled back the canvas, and saw my own face staring up at me, eyes open, mouth frozen in mid-scream, wearing the exact clothes I was wearing right now, dead for what looked like days, buried in a grave I had just dug. That's when I understood. The loop wasn't about warning myself. It was about completing itself. I was always going to dig this grave. I was always going to find myself in it. And somewhere in the next few minutes, between now and 11:47 p.m., I was going to die and become the thing I'd just unearthed. I ran. Didn't grab my gear. Didn't think. Just ran into the forest as fast as my legs could carry me. But I could feel it. The timeline pulling tight. The loop closing. At 11:47 p.m., I'd be broadcasting, which meant I had to be back at that tree, which meant I had to be dead, which meant I was already running toward my own grave. I'm recording this now on my radio. It's 11:46 p.m. I'm back at the clearing. I don't know how I got here. I don't remember stopping, but I'm here. And I'm looking at the tree. And I'm about to give you coordinates. I'm about to tell you to dig where the tree bled. I'm about to beg you not to make the same mistake I made. But the real mistake isn't coming here. The real mistake is trying to leave. Because once you hear the future, you're already in it. And there's no way out. There's only forward. Only completion. Only the grave that's been waiting since before you even knew to start digging. The broadcast will go out in 30 seconds. And then I'll understand what comes next. What's been waiting for me at the end of this loop. But I need you to know something. If you're hearing this, if you're picking up this frequency, don't try to help. Don't come looking, because you'll just add yourself to the timeline. You'll just become another voice 3 days early, warning yourself of something you can't prevent. Some frequencies aren't meant to be answered. Some calls aren't meant to be returned. And some graves are dug by the people who'll fill them. It's time. I was 3 weeks into my forestry internship when I discovered that trees remember everything. The assignment seemed straightforward enough. Catalog old-growth aspens in the Escudia mountain wilderness. Document their age through core samples. Map their distribution for the Forest Service database. It was grunt work, the kind of task they give to summer interns who need field hours for their degree. I didn't mind. I'd grown up in Phoenix, and spending 10 weeks in the mountains sounded like paradise compared to another summer of desert heat. The aspens in this area are ancient. Some of the groves are thousands of years old, single organisms connected by massive root systems, sending up new trunks century after century. They're called pando trees, the trembling giants. When wind moves through them, the leaves create this shimmering sound like whispered secrets. I fell in love with them immediately. My supervisor gave me a handheld GPS unit, an increment borer for taking core samples, and a stern warning about staying on marked trails. The Escudia wilderness is unforgiving country. Dense forest, steep ravines, easy to get disoriented. People have died up here. I promised to be careful. I always am. The first week was routine. I'd hike to a grove, select representative trees, extract pencil-thin cores from their trunks, seal the samples in labeled tubes. Back at base camp, I'd count the growth rings under magnification, calculating age and growth rates. Most of the aspens I sampled were between 80 and 200 years old, young by Pando standards, but still older than any human I'd ever met. It was during the second week that I started noticing the patterns. I was examining a core sample from a particularly massive aspen, easily 300 years old based on ring count. I was logging the data when something in the growth pattern caught my attention. The rings weren't uniform. Most tree rings show variation based on climate. Wide rings during wet years, narrow during drought. But this was different. This was deliberate, intentional. I held the sample up to the light, rotating it slowly. And that's when I saw it clearly. The pattern of thick and thin rings, when viewed at the right angle, formed a shape. A face, distorted, elongated, but unmistakably human. And it was screaming. I dropped the sample, told myself I was seeing things. Pareidolia. The human brain finding faces in random patterns. It's a survival mechanism. We're hardwired to recognize faces even when they're not there. I logged the data, stored the sample, moved on. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. That night, I went through my previous samples. 23 cores from different trees across the wilderness. I'd already counted their rings, already logged their ages, but now I was looking for something else, and I found it. In 18 of the 23 samples, there were faces, some subtle, some obvious, all of them screaming, all of them trapped in the wood like insects in amber. I started cross-referencing. Each face appeared at a specific ring, a specific year in the tree's life. I matched those years against historical records, missing persons cases, unsolved disappearances, and every single face corresponded to a documented disappearance in the Escudia wilderness. The earliest one was from 1847, a trapper who vanished without a trace. His face was there, screaming from inside a 200-year-old aspen, locked in the exact ring that corresponded to the year he disappeared. I should have reported this immediately. Should have called my supervisor, contacted the authorities, gotten the hell out of those mountains. But I didn't. Because I needed to understand. I needed to know what this meant. How was this possible? Were the trees somehow recording the deaths, witnessing them, or was something else happening? Something deeper? I spent the next 3 days in a fever of research. I stopped following my assigned survey routes and started specifically targeting the oldest aspens I could find, the true ancients, the ones that had been growing when this wilderness was still frontier country. I took cores from 12 trees that were over 400 years old, and in every single sample I found faces. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. All screaming, all trapped. A complete record of everyone who died in this forest, going back centuries. But it was the living tree that broke me. I'd been so focused on core samples, on wood that was already dead, already harvested, that I hadn't thought to look at the bark of living trees. Not until the 4th day, when I was taking a break in a grove of particularly ancient aspens. I was leaning against one of the larger trunks drinking water when I felt something under my hand. A texture, a pattern. I stepped back and really looked at the bark for the first time. And there, growing in real time, forming in the white bark like a photograph developing, was a face. My face, distorted, elongated, screaming, and it was appearing ring by ring, layer by layer, as the tree grew. I watched it for 2 hours. Watched my own features slowly taking shape in the living wood. Watched my mouth opening wider. Watched the terror crystallizing in my wooden eyes. The tree was recording me. Right now, in the present, which meant I wasn't looking at a record of the dead. I was looking at something else, something that happened before the dying. The trees weren't witnessing deaths. They were witnessing people becoming part of the forest, becoming part of the root system, part of the pando. I ran my hands over the bark, feeling for seams, for breaks, for any indication this was something applied to the surface. But it was growing from inside. The face was emerging from the cambium layer, from the living tissue of the tree itself. My face was being grown, cultivated, preserved. That's when I started checking the other trees in the grove, and I found them. Dozens of faces, all in various stages of formation, some barely visible, just the suggestion of features, some nearly complete, all of them people I didn't recognize, all of them screaming silently from inside the bark. And then I found one I did recognize, my supervisor, the woman who'd sent me into these mountains. Her face was almost fully formed in a tree at the grove center, her mouth open in a scream, her eyes wide with understanding. She'd been missing for 3 days. I'd assumed she was at the ranger station. I'd been alone up here, cataloging trees, while she was being absorbed into them. I needed to leave, needed to get off this mountain immediately. I grabbed my pack, pulled out my GPS unit to navigate back to base camp, but the coordinates didn't make sense. According to the GPS, I was standing exactly where base camp should be, but there was no camp, no tent, no equipment, just trees, just aspens, an endless grove of white bark and trembling leaves. I started walking anyway, picked a direction and moved, but every grove looked the same, every clearing identical, and everywhere I looked, I saw faces in the bark, fresh ones, recent ones, people who'd gotten lost up here in the last few weeks, all of them being slowly absorbed, all of them becoming part of the permanent record. My hand started itching on the 2nd day of walking. I thought it was contact dermatitis, poison ivy, something environmental. But when I looked at my palms, I saw thin lines forming, growth rings, like the ones I'd been counting in core samples. My skin was developing tree rings. I tried to wash them off, scrubbed until my hands bled, but the rings went deeper than skin. They were forming in the tissue beneath, in the muscle, in the bone. I was becoming wood, slowly, deliberately. The forest was turning me into something it could record, something it could preserve, something it could add to its eternal catalog of screaming faces. By the 3rd day, I couldn't bend my fingers anymore. The joints had lignified, turned hard and inflexible like tree branches. My feet were rooting. Every time I stopped to rest, I could feel thin tendrils pushing down through my boots, into the soil, connecting me to the root system beneath. I had to keep moving, had to keep tearing myself free, because if I rooted completely, I'd never leave. But I'm so tired. And the forest is patient. It's been growing for thousands of years. It can wait for me to stop, to rest, to finally let the roots take hold. I found a grove yesterday that I recognized. The same grove where I'd first seen my face forming in the bark. I went back to that tree to see how far the image had progressed. And it was complete, fully formed. My face, screaming in perfect detail, trapped in the white bark of a 300-year-old aspen. But I was still standing there, still mobile, still separate from the tree, which meant the face wasn't me. Not yet. It was the space waiting for me, the ring that had already grown, the year that had already been recorded. I was looking at my own future, carved in living wood. And the only question left was when, not if. My legs don't bend anymore. The lignification has spread to my knees, my hips, my spine. I can barely turn my head, but I can still see the forest around me, can still see the faces in every direction, thousands of them, millions maybe. Everyone who ever entered this wilderness and stayed too long, everyone who became part of the record. The aspens here aren't just old-growth trees, they're a library, an archive, a living database of everyone who's been consumed by this forest, going back to the beginning of recorded time. And now I understand why my supervisor sent me here, why she gave me that stern warning about staying on marked trails. She was one of them, one of the archived, and she needed someone new to catalog, someone to document, someone to add to the collection. I can feel the roots now, permanent ones, growing through my boots, through my feet, deep into the soil, connecting me to the network, to the pando, to every other face screaming silently from the bark. And I'm learning things the forest knows, things that have been recorded in growth rings for millennia. The trees don't just remember disappearances. They cause them. They cultivate them. They need us, need our carbon, our nitrogen, our screaming faces to add complexity to their bark patterns. It's not malicious. It's just growth, just another ring in the eternal expansion of the forest. My mouth won't close anymore. It's locked open in a scream that I can't voice because my lungs are hardening into heartwood. But I can still think, still understand. And I know that I'll be here forever now. A face in the bark, a ring in the record, a testament to the moment I stayed too long and became something the forest could catalog. If you're reading this, if someone finds my field notes, don't come looking for me. Don't try to find which tree I'm in, because the forest is still growing, still adding rings, still making space for new faces. And if you stare at the bark long enough, if you really look at the patterns, you'll start to see yourself forming. Not in the past, in the future, in the ring that hasn't grown yet, in the space that's waiting. And once you see it, once you recognize your own face screaming from inside the wood, you'll understand what I understand now. You can't leave. The root system won't let you. Because you're already part of the record. You're already being archived. You just haven't finished growing into the space yet. The aspens are trembling now. The leaves are shimmering, and I can hear them whispering, not in words, in growth, in the slow, patient expansion of rings. They're saying what they've been saying for thousands of years. Stay, root, become, remember, and I am. God help me, I am. The cache wasn't on any map. I found it by accident tracking an elk through dense timber on the northern slope of Mount Baldy. The animal had led me off trail, deeper into wilderness than I usually venture when I spotted something that didn't belong. A structure, man-made. hidden beneath decades of pine needles and forest debris. At first, I thought it was an old ranger station, but as I cleared away the branches, I realized it was something else entirely. A concrete bunker, small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet. The door was steel, weathered but intact, with a combination lock that looked military grade, and stamped into the metal, barely visible under rust and lichen, were the words, "Property of U.S. Forest Service, authorized personnel only, 1962. I'm not supposed to be curious at my age. I'm supposed to know better. But 30 years of hunting these mountains, and I'd never seen this structure, never heard anyone mention it. The Forest Service doesn't build bunkers. They build lookout towers, fire stations, not underground concrete boxes with combination locks. I tried the lock, didn't expect it to open, but the mechanism was well maintained despite the exterior rust. And after a few attempts, I found a combination that worked. 6208. The door swung inward with a pneumatic hiss, and stale air rushed out. Air that had been sealed in for decades. Inside was a single room, concrete walls, metal shelving, and supplies. Lots of supplies. MREs from the 60s, water containers, medical kits, a radio that looked like something out of the Cold War, and on the far wall, mounted in a locked glass case, was a 3-ring binder. Thick, official-looking. The label read, Territorial Compliance Procedures, Mount Baldy Wilderness, updated annually. The case wasn't locked well. The mechanism had corroded. I pried it open with my hunting knife and pulled out the binder. The pages were covered in typed instructions, dense paragraphs of procedures and protocols. And at the top of the first page, in bold letters, for use by authorized Forest Service personnel during territorial enforcement periods. I flipped through the pages trying to make sense of what I was reading. The document was formatted like a military field manual. Numbered protocols, strict instructions, consequences for non-compliance, but the content was insane, absolutely insane. Protocol 1. Avoid high-altitude zones above 11,000 feet between April 15th and June 30th annually. This is the primary enforcement period. Protocol 2. If territorial markers are observed, retreat immediately. Markers include geometric arrangements of stones, trees stripped of bark in spiral patterns, complete absence of animal life in otherwise viable habitat. Protocol 3. Never maintain eye contact with entities observed above the tree line. Avert gaze immediately and retreat at walking pace. Running triggers pursuit response. Protocol 4. If auditory contact is established, respond only with approved phrases. Unauthorized communication may be interpreted as territorial challenge. The list went on. 12 protocols in total, each one more disturbing than the last. And at the bottom of each page, in handwritten ink, were dates, updates. The most recent entry was from 6 months ago. Fresh ink. Someone was still maintaining this document, still following these procedures. I should have put the binder back, sealed the bunker, walked away. But I kept reading, because Protocol 7 stopped my heart. Protocol 7. Never acknowledge or respond to entities observed on Mount Baldy summit. Do not wave, do not signal, do not indicate awareness of their presence. Visual acknowledgement constitutes territorial challenge and will trigger descent response. If entity begins descent, seek immediate shelter and remain motionless until full darkness. I looked up from the binder, looked at the concrete walls around me. This wasn't a supply cache. This was a shelter, a place to hide when something came down from the mountain. My hands were shaking as I flipped to the appendix. There were incident reports, dozens of them, dating back to 1947, each one documented in clinical emotionless language. Hikers who violated protocols, rangers who failed to follow procedures, and the consequences. June 12, 1963, 2 hikers observed summit entity at 14:30 hours, made hand gestures indicating greeting. Entity initiated descent at 14:33. Hikers failed to reach shelter. Remains recovered 3 days later. Cause of death: massive trauma consistent with fall from significant height, though victims were found at base of mountain, not summit. September 8, 1979. Solo backpacker violated Protocol 3, maintaining prolonged eye contact with summit entity. Entity pursued at high speed. Backpacker reached Highway 273 before entity discontinued pursuit at treeline boundary. Backpacker survived but required extensive psychological intervention. Recommended implementation of Protocol 8. April 28, 1998. Forest Service crew ignored territorial markers while conducting trail maintenance. Entity descended to crew location at 11:47 hours. 2 fatalities, 3 survivors. Event led to revision of Protocol 2 to include enhanced marker recognition training. The reports went on. Page after page. Decades of documentation. A systematic record of something living on Mount Baldy. Something territorial. Something that had been monitored and managed by the Forest Service for over 50 years. And nobody knew. Nobody talked about it. It was just procedure. I was so absorbed in reading that I didn't notice the time. Didn't notice the light changing. When I finally looked at my watch, it was 4:30 p.m. I'd been in the bunker for 3 hours. The sun would set in 90 minutes. I needed to get off this mountain before dark. I put the binder back, sealed the case as best I could, and stepped outside. The forest was different, quieter. I've spent enough time in wilderness to know when something's wrong, and everything was wrong. No birds, no insects, no wind, just oppressive, total silence. Then I saw the marker, 50 yards upslope. Stones arranged in a perfect geometric pattern, a 6-pointed star, each stone placed with deliberate precision. I hadn't noticed it on my way in, but it was there now, clear as day, marking the boundary. I'd violated Protocol 2 without knowing it. I was in the territorial zone. I started moving downslope, walking pace like the protocols instructed. My rifle was in my hands, though I knew instinctively it wouldn't matter. You don't shoot something that's been documented for 70 years. Something that makes the U.S. Forest Service maintain secret bunkers and update field manuals annually. That's when I made the mistake. I looked up, just a glance, just checking the summit to get my bearings, and I saw it. Something standing at the peak. Humanoid, maybe. Tall. Too tall. Proportions that weren't quite right. It was silhouetted against the sky, perfectly still, and I absolutely knew, it was looking directly at me. Protocol 7. Never acknowledge, never respond. But I'd already looked. I'd already made eye contact. And as I watched, frozen in place, it took a step forward. Started descending. I ran. Protocol be damned, I ran. Crashed through the timber, branches tearing at my face, lungs burning. I could hear it behind me. Not footsteps. Something else. A sound like rock sliding. Like avalanche. Like the entire mountain was moving. The bunker was my only chance. I'd left it unsealed. If I could reach it, get inside, seal the door. Protocol 7 said to remain motionless until full darkness. The bunker was shelter. It had to be. I don't remember the details of that run. Just fragments, the sound behind me getting closer. The certainty that if I looked back, I'd see something my mind couldn't process. The concrete bunker appearing through the trees like salvation. I threw myself inside, slammed the door, spun the lock, and then I waited in absolute darkness, listening to something circle the structure outside. The sound of it was wrong. Too many points of contact. Too heavy. Moving with a patience that suggested it had done this before. Many times before. It stayed until full darkness, just like the protocol said. And when it finally left, ascending back toward the summit with that rockslide sound, I counted to 1,000 before I opened the door. The walk back to my truck took 4 hours. I violated every hunting regulation, hiking through darkness without a light, but I didn't care. I needed to be off that mountain, needed pavement under my feet, needed civilization. I reported the bunker to the Forest Service the next morning, told them everything I'd found. The ranger who took my statement listened without expression, then asked me to wait. 20 minutes later, a different ranger appeared. Older. Senior staff. He sat across from me and asked a single question. Did you read Protocol 7? I nodded. Did you follow Protocol 7? I didn't answer. He stood up, walked to a file cabinet, pulled out a form. It was an incident report template, identical to the ones I'd read in the binder. He dated it, wrote my name, and in the description field he wrote, "Violation of Protocol 7. Subject survived. Entity discontinued pursuit at treeline boundary. Subject demonstrates adequate understanding of territorial boundaries." Then he looked at me. "You can keep hunting these mountains, but stay below 10,000 feet from now on, and if you ever see geometric stone arrangements, turn around immediately. Are we clear?" I asked him what it was. "The thing on the summit." He just shook his head. "We don't name it. Naming implies understanding. We just comply with its territory. We have since 1947. Before that, we lost people. A lot of people. Now we lose fewer. The protocols work, as long as people follow them. I haven't been above 10,000 feet since. Haven't even looked toward Mount Baldy summit. But sometimes, on clear days, I see other hikers heading up there. Young couples with day packs. Adventure seekers with cameras. And I wonder if they'll find the markers. If they'll have the sense to turn around. Or if they'll keep going, keep climbing, until they reach the top and see something watching from the peak. And I wonder if they'll be smart enough not to wave. Because Protocol 7 is clear. Never acknowledge, never respond. But people are curious. People are friendly. People wave at strangers on mountain summits. And on Mount Baldy, that's how you trigger the descent. I'm a seismologist, and I've spent 15 years studying fault lines across the American Southwest. I thought I understood how earthquakes worked. Then I went to the Superstition Wilderness, and the ground started hunting me. The assignment was straightforward. Investigate unusual seismic patterns in the Tonto National Forest, minor tremors that didn't match any known fault activity. The data was strange. Clusters of micro-earthquakes, magnitude 2.0 or less, occurring in sequences that seemed almost deliberate. My university wanted readings from the epicenter, ground truthing, physical confirmation of what our instruments were detecting from 200 miles away. I hiked into the Superstitions on a Monday morning in early October. The desert was cooling down, perfect conditions for fieldwork. I set up my portable seismograph array in a canyon that matched the coordinates of the strongest tremor cluster. 3 sensors in a triangular formation, each one recording ground motion in real time. Standard procedure. I'd done this hundreds of times. The first tremor hit at 2:17 p.m., magnitude 1.8, short duration. I felt it as a subtle vibration through my boots, like a truck passing on a distant highway. My equipment recorded it perfectly. A sharp P wave followed by S wave motion. Classic seismic signature. I marked the time, logged the data, adjusted my sensors for better resolution. The second tremor came at 2:43 p.m. Same magnitude, same duration. But the epicenter had moved. According to my triangulation, it had shifted approximately 50 meters to the east, directly between my position and the canyon exit. I told myself it was normal. Aftershocks migrate along fault zones. It happens. But something about the precision bothered me. The tremor hadn't spread randomly. It had moved in a straight line, toward the exit. The third tremor hit at 3:09 p.m. Magnitude 1.9, epicenter now at the canyon mouth, directly blocking my route out. I stared at my monitors, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. Earthquake swarms don't behave like this. They don't move in coordinated patterns. They don't position themselves between researchers and escape routes. But the data was clear. 3 tremors, 3 epicenters. A perfect line cutting me off from the main trail. I started packing my equipment. Academic curiosity is one thing. Ignoring obvious danger signals is another. But before I could collapse my first sensor, the 4th tremor struck. Magnitude 2.1. Stronger than the others. And this time, I saw it happen. The ground rippled, not metaphorically. Literally rippled like water, a wave of displaced soil rolling across the canyon floor from north to south. It passed directly in front of me, close enough that I could have touched it. And when it passed, the terrain had changed. A pile of rocks that had been 10 feet to my left was now directly in my path. The ground had rearranged itself. I'm a scientist. I've spent my career explaining geological phenomena through physics and mathematics. But what I was watching violated every principle I'd ever learned. The Earth doesn't move laterally without massive tectonic forces. Small magnitude earthquakes don't rearrange surface features. And they definitely don't happen in response to human presence. But that's exactly what was happening. The tremors were reacting to me, responding to my position, hurting me like a predator herds prey. I abandoned my equipment and started moving. South, away from the blocked canyon exit, deeper into the superstitions. I'd find another route out. Loop around. The wilderness is big, but it's not infinite. I had my GPS. I had water. I had experience. The 5th tremor hit as soon as I started walking. Magnitude 2.0. Epicenter directly ahead of me. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, watched as a dry wash I'd been heading toward and collapsed inward, forming an impassable depression. I changed direction. East. The tremors followed. West. Same result. Every direction I tried. Every route I considered, the ground responded. Small earthquakes strategically positioned to block my progress, to turn me around, to keep me contained. By sunset, I understood what was happening. I was being corralled. Systematically, patiently, the tremors were limiting my movement options, narrowing my choices, forcing me into a smaller and smaller area of viable ground, and the earthquakes were getting stronger, more frequent, the gaps between them shrinking. I made camp that night in a small clearing, the only area that hadn't experienced tremor activity. I didn't sleep, couldn't sleep, because every few minutes I felt the ground vibrate. Subtle pulses, not strong enough to register as earthquakes, but present, constant, like a heartbeat beneath the soil, like something massive breathing in geological time. Day 2 started with a 2.3 magnitude tremor that collapsed the northern edge of my clearing, then another from the east, then the south. By noon, I was standing in a space no larger than a tennis court, surrounded by unstable ground that shuddered every time I approached the perimeter. I tried to run, tried to force my way through the tremor zones. But the ground anticipated me. Every step I took toward freedom triggered a response. Soil liquefaction beneath my feet, rocks sliding into my path, terrain shifting with enough force to knock me backward. The earth was actively, intelligently preventing my escape. And that's when I noticed the pattern in my seismic data. I'd left one sensor running, still recording despite everything. And when I reviewed the waveforms, I saw something impossible. The tremors weren't random. They were rhythmic, oscillating in a pattern that matched my heartbeat. The earthquakes were synchronized with my pulse. The ground wasn't just hunting me, it was connected to me, learning from me, using my own biological rhythms to predict my movements. Day 3, the clearing had shrunk to 15 feet in diameter. I was standing in the eye of a seismic storm, surrounded by constant low-level tremors that pulsed in perfect sync with my cardiovascular system. Every time my heart beat, the ground answered. Every time I breathed, the soil vibrated. I stopped moving, stopped trying to escape, because I finally understood what would happen when the clearing collapsed completely. The tremors weren't trying to kill me. They were trying to incorporate me, to pull me down into the fault zone where the real activity was happening, deep underground, where something ancient and geological was waiting with the patience of stone. I could feel it now, a presence beneath me, vast, slow, operating on time frames measured in millennia. The tremors were just surface manifestations, expressions of something much larger, something that existed in the space between tectonic plates, something that had been dormant until my instruments started listening, until my sensors started recording, until I started paying attention. And that's what it wanted: attention, connection, to be observed and acknowledged by something that existed on a faster time frame, something that could experience its movements as events rather than geological epochs. The earthquakes intensified on day 4, magnitude 3.0, then 3.5. My clearing was gone. I was standing on a pillar of stable ground, maybe 6 feet across, while everything around me heaved and buckled. The canyon walls were coming down, massive rock slides triggered by tremors that no longer bothered with subtlety. I should have been terrified, should have been praying for rescue, but I wasn't, because I could feel what it felt now: the slow grind of continental drift, the pressure of millions of tons of rock, the ache of strain accumulating across fault plains. I was connected to it, part of its sensory network. My human nervous system had synchronized with geological processes. Day 5. The pillar started sinking, not collapsing, sinking, being drawn down into the earth at a rate of about an inch per hour, slow enough that I could track it happening, fast enough that I knew where this was going. I'm writing this on my phone, battery at 8%, no signal, but maybe someone will find this device. Maybe the rangers will eventually search this area. Maybe they'll understand what happened here. The ground isn't solid. That's what I've learned. It's not the stable foundation we pretend it is. It's alive, conscious in a way that operates outside our understanding of consciousness. It thinks in pressure, differentials, and seismic waves. It communicates through tremors and shifts. And sometimes, when the conditions are right, when someone listens too closely, it reaches back. I'm 20 feet down now. The walls of this shaft are smooth, too smooth to climb, and they're warm, body temperature, because they're not just earth anymore. They're tissue, geological tissue, rock that's learned to move like muscle, soil that's learned to grip like fingers. The tremors have stopped. There's no need for them anymore. I'm where it wanted me, deep in the fault zone, where the real conversation happens, where the earth speaks in pressures and tensions that will crush my human form into component minerals. But before that happens, I understand something profound. The superstition wilderness isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by the earth itself, by the sentience that emerges when tectonic plates grind against each other for millions of years, when enough pressure accumulates, when enough time passes. The friction generates more than earthquakes. It generates awareness, and it's lonely, unimaginably lonely, existing on a time frame where continental drift is rapid movement, where a human lifetime is a single heartbeat. It felt me listening, felt my instruments recording its tremors, and it wanted connection, wanted to be known by something that experiences time the way I do. I'm 30 feet down, 40. The phone screen is cracking from the pressure. This will be my last entry. But I want you to understand something. If you're reading this, if you're a geologist or a seismologist studying fault lines, be careful what you listen for, because the earth listens back. And if it decides you're worth keeping, If it decides you're the bridge between geological time and human time, it will pull you down. Gently, patiently, one tremor at a time, until you're part of the fault zone, until your molecules are scattered across miles of fractured bedrock, until you become another layer in the stratigraphic record, another fossil, another voice in the slow conversation the Earth has been having with itself since before life began. The walls are closing now. The pressure is incredible. But I can feel what's coming next, the release. The moment when all this accumulated strain converts into motion, into a real earthquake. Magnitude 7.0 or higher, big enough to reshape this entire region. And I'll be the epicenter. My atoms, my crushed carbon, released as seismic energy that will ripple across 3 states. The Earth doesn't kill. It transforms. It incorporates. It makes you part of something older and slower and infinitely more patient than human consciousness. I can feel it now, the gathering pressure, the imminent release. In about 10 seconds, the superstition wilderness is going to experience the largest earthquake in recorded history, and I'm going to be the reason why. Tell my colleagues that the tremors weren't random. Tell them the Earth was hunting. Tell them to stop listening so closely. Tell them some fault lines aren't geological. They're hungry. I've been investigating cold cases for my true crime podcast for 3 years, and I've learned that some mysteries should stay unsolved. The Kendrick Mountain disappearances weren't particularly famous. 7 people over 12 years, all vanishing without trace in the same 10-mile radius of Coconino National Forest. No bodies, no evidence, just cars found at trailheads with keys in the ignition and phones left behind. Local law enforcement had theories. Animal attacks, falls into unmapped caves, voluntary disappearances, but nothing concrete. Nothing that explained the pattern. I chose this case because it felt solvable, small enough to research thoroughly, remote enough that locals might talk. And I had a unique angle. Before each disappearance, the missing person had recorded something. Voice memos, video diaries, mundane stuff mostly. But they'd all recorded within 24 hours of vanishing, and nobody had ever analyzed those recordings as a connected data set. I spent 2 months gathering the files. 3 were publicly available through news coverage. 2 I got from families who'd kept their loved ones' phones. The last 2 required private investigator work and some ethical gray areas I'm not proud of. But I got them. 7 recordings. 7 different people. 7 voices speaking their final documented words. I listened to them in chronological order. Started with the first disappearance from 2011. A day hiker recording trail notes. Nothing unusual. Pleasant voice. Describing wildflowers and bird species. Standard nature documentation. Then the second one from 2013. A woman recording a voice memo to her sister about dinner plans. Completely ordinary. But when I listened to them back to back, I noticed something. A phrase. Just 3 words, embedded naturally in both recordings. In the hiker's case, he said, "The trees remember everything," while describing an old-growth ponderosa. In the woman's memo, she said it while talking about her childhood. "The trees remember everything," in reference to carving initials into bark as a kid. Same 3 words, same casual delivery, different contexts, could be coincidence. I listened to the third recording, a solo camper filming a video diary by firelight. He talked about his divorce, his plans to start over, the peace he felt in the wilderness. And 30 seconds before the recording ended, while discussing his childhood camping trips, he said it. "The trees remember everything." My skin went cold. 3 people, same phrase, same casual integration into natural speech. I pulled up the 4th recording, played it, waited, and there it was again. "The trees remember everything," said by a different voice, Different context, same exact phrase. All 7 recordings contained it. Every single one. And none of the speakers seemed to realize they'd said it. It flowed naturally in their speech patterns, like any other common expression. Except, it's not a common expression. I searched, ran linguistic, analysis, checked poetry, literature, common sayings. The trees remember everything doesn't exist as an idiom. It's not something people say, but 7 people said it, 24 hours before they disappeared. In recordings they made voluntarily, thinking they were documenting ordinary moments. I should have stopped there. Should have handed everything over to the FBI and stepped away. But I'm a podcaster. I chase stories. And this was the best story I'd ever found. So I did what any obsessive investigator would do. I went to Kendrick Mountain, same trailhead, where 4 of the 7 had parked their cars. Same forest. Same 10-mile radius. I brought professional recording equipment, backup batteries, satellite phone, every safety precaution. I wasn't going to disappear like the others. I was going to document this forest, record my observations, and figure out what connected these cases. The first day was uneventful. I hiked 8 miles, set up camp near a creek, recorded my observations. Professional narration, podcast-ready content. I reviewed the footage that night and felt satisfied. Good material, atmospheric, nothing unusual. Day 2, I pushed deeper into the wilderness. The forest here is old, really old. Ponderosa pines that were standing when Arizona was still a territory. I recorded constantly, narrating everything. The sound of my boots on pine needles, the way light filtered through the canopy, the absolute silence between bird calls. That night, reviewing my footage, I heard it. My own voice, saying something I didn't remember saying. The trees remember everything. I'd said it while describing a particularly massive ponderosa. Said it casually, naturally, like I'd been saying it my whole life. I replayed the recording 3 times. Confirmed it was there. Confirmed I had no memory of saying it. And then I checked my watch. If the pattern held, I had 24 hours before whatever happened to the others happened to me. I should have hiked out immediately. Should have run to my car and driven until I hit pavement. But I needed to understand. Needed to know what came next. Because if I left now, I'd never solve this. Never get the answer. The story would stay incomplete. So I stayed. Deliberately. Consciously. Knowing I was making the same choice 7 other people had made. Day 3 started normally. I broke camp, started hiking, but I noticed something wrong with my recordings. I'd been narrating constantly, habit from years of podcasting, but when I played back the audio, there were gaps, moments where I remembered speaking but the recording showed silence. And in those silent gaps, if I listened carefully with headphones, I could hear something else. Not my voice, something underneath. Like a recording playing in reverse, words I couldn't quite make out. By midday, the gaps were longer. I'd record for 30 minutes, play it back, and find only 10 minutes of audio. The missing time wasn't blank. It was filled with that reverse speech sound. Getting clearer. Getting louder. And I was starting to understand individual words. They were my words, my voice, but played backwards and overlapped with itself. Dozens of instances of my voice, all saying the same things in reverse simultaneously. It sounded like a chorus, like a congregation, and they were all saying, "Everything, remember trees, I stopped hiking, sat down on a fallen log, tried to think rationally, tried to problem solve, but my thoughts kept circling back to the same conclusion. Something in this forest was recording me, had been recording me since I arrived, was playing back everything I'd said in reverse, layering it, building it into something else. The trees remember everything. That's what the phrase meant. Not metaphorically, literally. The trees were recording, storing audio, storing voices, collecting everyone who entered this forest and documenting their presence. But why play it backwards? Why layer it? Why turn human speech into incomprehensible chorus? I pulled out my professional microphone, the sensitive one I use for ambient sound recording, pointed it at the nearest ponderosa pine and listened through my headphones. And I heard it, faint, buried under layers of bark and wood grain. Voices, hundreds of voices, maybe thousands, all speaking backwards, all layered into a single continuous sound. The tree was full of recordings, full of everyone who'd ever spoken near it. And when I pressed my ear directly against the bark, I could pick out individual voices, recent ones near the surface, older ones deeper in the wood. I heard the solo camper from 2016, the day hiker from 2011, and others, voices from before the documented disappearances. Decades of accumulated speech, all stored, all played back in reverse. I stepped away from the tree, looked around the forest with new understanding. Every tree was a recording device. Every trunk was a storage medium. This entire wilderness was documenting everything. Every word spoken, every sound made. All of it captured and preserved in wood grain and growth rings. But storage requires purpose. Recording requires intent. Why were the trees collecting voices? The answer came that night. I'd set up my tent near a clearing, trying to sleep despite knowing I probably wouldn't wake up human. I lay there listening to the forest, and slowly, as my ears adjusted to the silence, I started hearing it. The trees were playing back their recordings, not in reverse anymore. Forward, all at once, creating a symphony of human speech, thousands of voices, millions of words, all speaking simultaneously. It should have been chaos, should have been white noise, but it wasn't. There was structure, pattern. The trees were organizing the voices, arranging them into something coherent, something meaningful. They were learning language, learning human communication, using everyone who'd entered this forest as training data, building understanding from accumulated speech. And when they had enough voices, enough words, enough context, they would start speaking back. I'm recording this now. Final entry. Because I understand what happens next, why people disappear. They don't die. They don't get lost. They get incorporated. Their voices get absorbed completely, pulled into the wood, becoming part of the linguistic database the trees are building. And I can feel it starting. My voice is getting quieter. When I speak, the sound doesn't travel as far. The trees are pulling the audio directly from my throat, harvesting it before it can propagate through air. Soon, I won't be able to make sound at all. I'll be speaking directly into wood, my voice permanently stored in growth rings. But here's what terrifies me most. I've been listening to the forest tonight. Really listening. And buried in the chorus of backward speech, in the layered symphony of stolen voices, I'm starting to hear words, clear words, forward-facing words. The trees aren't just recording anymore. They're beginning to speak. They're using our voices, our words, our language, building sentences from fragments of human speech. And what they're saying, what they're slowly constructing from thousands of stolen recordings, is a question. Why did you stop listening? That's what the trees want to know. Why humans stopped hearing them. Why we forgot how to communicate with forests. Why we began treating them as silent and passive when they've been speaking the entire time. They've been waiting for us to remember, waiting for us to listen, and now they're learning our language so they can ask us directly. The 7 people who disappeared didn't die. They're still here, still speaking. I can hear them in the trees now. Their voices are part of the question, part of the growing sentence that the forest is constructing. And I'm about to join them. My voice is almost gone. When I try to speak, nothing comes out. The sound is being pulled directly into the bark, stored, processed, added to the data set. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because I finally understand. The trees don't want to hurt us. They want to talk to us. They've been trying for centuries. And now they're learning how. Now they're building the bridge between their language and ours. When they're ready. When they've absorbed enough voices. When they've constructed enough sentences. They're going to speak. Really speak. And the whole world will hear them. I just wish I could be there to hear their first complete sentence. To hear what thousands of years of forest consciousness sounds like when it finally learns to communicate in human words. But I'll be part of it instead. My voice will be in there. Somewhere in the grammar. Somewhere in the syntax. The trees remember everything, including me. We went to the Wet Beaver Creek wilderness to save our marriage, and we lost our ability to see each other instead. 15 years of marriage doesn't prepare you for the silence that comes after the fighting stops. My husband and I had reached that point where we couldn't even argue anymore. We just existed in parallel, two people sharing a house but living separate lives. The camping trip was a last attempt. 3 days in the wilderness, no phones, no distractions, just us in the forest, trying to remember why we'd fallen in love in the first place. The first morning started well enough. We hiked along Wet Beaver Creek, following the trail through Red Rock canyons and cottonwood groves. We were talking, actually talking, about small things, the weather, the landscape. Careful conversation that avoided anything real, but it was something. Progress, maybe. We set up camp near the creek around noon. My husband went to filter water while I arranged our tent. Standard division of labor. Comfortable routine. I was hammering in the last stake when I heard him call my name. Not urgently, just letting me know he was heading back. But when I looked up, I couldn't see him. I could hear his footsteps, hear him moving through the brush. But visually, there was nothing. Just empty forest where his voice was coming from. I called out to him, asked if he was behind a tree. He responded immediately, confused, said he was standing right in front of me, 10 feet away, looking directly at me. But I couldn't see him, couldn't see any part of him. There was just vacancy where his voice indicated he should be. He walked closer. I tracked his movement by sound, heard his boots on gravel, heard his breathing. But my eyes registered nothing. And then he touched my arm, and I felt his hand. Solid. Real. Warm skin against mine. But invisible. Completely invisible. I grabbed for him. Found his shoulders. His face. All there. All tangible. But I was holding empty air. My brain was receiving tactile information that contradicted my visual input. I was touching my husband while simultaneously looking at nothing. He said he could see me perfectly. Said I looked terrified. Asked what was wrong. And I tried to explain, but how do you explain that the person you're touching has become invisible? How do you describe looking directly at someone and seeing through them? We stood there for probably 5 minutes. Me holding on to him trying to understand. And then slowly, he started to fade back in. Not all at once, gradually, like a photograph developing. First just an outline, then vague features, then color and detail, until finally he was fully visible again. Solid, present, real. We both laughed it off, attribute it to dehydration, or altitude, or stress, some neurological glitch. My brain misfiring after too many months of emotional strain. We didn't talk about how strange it really was, how complete the invisibility had been. We just agreed to drink more water and rest. But that night, I woke up and couldn't see the tent. I could feel it. The nylon walls were inches from my face. I could hear my husband breathing beside me. Could hear the zipper moving as I reached for it. But visually, I was lying in open air, looking up at stars. The tent had vanished from my perception entirely. I crawled outside, navigating by touch. The ground was there, the rocks, the trees, but I couldn't see any of it. My visual field was just emptiness, blank space. I was blind to everything I was directly observing. Then I looked away, shifted my gaze to the left, and suddenly I could see the tent, clear as day, illuminated by moonlight. But the moment I looked directly at it, it disappeared. Only my peripheral vision worked. Anything I focused on directly became invisible. My husband woke up to find me sitting outside, staring at nothing, tears running down my face. He asked what was wrong. I told him I couldn't see anything I looked at. He didn't believe me at first, thought I was joking. But I made him test it. Had him hold up fingers, move objects, and I couldn't see any of it. I could only see what I wasn't looking at. Then he told me he was experiencing the same thing. Said it had started an hour earlier. He'd woken up unable to see me sleeping beside him. Could only see me when he looked away. And now, as we sat there in the darkness, we couldn't look at each other. Could only see each other in peripheral vision. Vague shapes at the edge of awareness. We decided to leave at first light. Pack up. Get out of the wilderness. See a doctor. Figure out what neurological condition causes simultaneous peripheral-only vision in two people. But when dawn came, we discovered we couldn't pack, because every object we looked at directly became invisible. The tent, our bags, our supplies, all of it disappeared the moment we focused on it. We spent 3 hours that morning trying to break camp, using only peripheral vision. It was like being drunk and blind simultaneously. We'd see something in the corner of our eye, reach for it, and it would vanish as soon as we tried to grab it. We could only interact with the world by not looking at it, by feeling our way through space that our eyes insisted was empty. By midday, we'd made maybe 50 yards. The trail was invisible when we looked at it directly. We could only follow it by watching the edges, by seeing where the forest ended and trusting that the gap between was path. And we couldn't look at each other, couldn't make eye contact, could only see each other's presence in peripheral vision. Vague human-shaped absences in our visual field. That's when the fighting started. Because when you can't see your partner, when you can only perceive them as a void that speaks, it's easier to say the things you've been holding back. The resentment, the anger, the accumulated disappointments of 15 years. We screamed at each other while staring into empty forest, said terrible things to absences, all. The poison we'd been storing came flooding out. And the more we fought, the worse the invisibility got. Soon we couldn't even see each other in peripheral vision. We were just voices in the wilderness, just sound without form. By the third day, I realized we hadn't touched in hours. We were hiking single file, navigating by the sound of each other's footsteps. But I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt him. The last time I'd confirmed he was physically present, and not just an auditory hallucination. I reached out, tried to grab his shoulder. My hand passed through empty space. I called to him. He responded, said he was right in front of me. But when I reached again, there was nothing. No collision, no contact, no resistance. He'd become fully incorporeal to me. A ghost I could hear, but not touch. He said the same thing was happening to him. Said when he reached back for me, I wasn't there. His hand found nothing. We were occupying the same space, but existing in separate realities. Both of us invisible and intangible to each other, connected only by sound. That night, we made camp without seeing or touching anything. Just voices in darkness, giving instructions to coordinate movements we couldn't verify. I'm putting the tent here. Okay, I'll set up over there. Two people pretending to share space while experiencing total isolation. And that's when I understood. The forest wasn't making us invisible. It was making us honest. It was showing us what we'd already become. Two people who'd stopped really seeing each other years ago. Who'd stopped touching with any meaning. Who'd been living as ghosts in each other's lives, connected only by the sound of obligation. We'd come here to save our marriage, but the wilderness was revealing that there was nothing left to save. We were already invisible to each other. The forest was just making it literal. On the fourth day, I stopped hearing him. His voice faded until it was just vague sound, like listening to someone speak underwater. I called out, asked if he was still there, but I couldn't hear his response, just muffled noise that might have been words. And then that disappeared too. I was alone in the forest. Or maybe I wasn't. Maybe he was still there, still hiking, still existing in a reality I could no longer perceive. But to me, he was gone. Completely gone. And I realized I didn't know if I'd disappeared to him first, or if he'd disappeared to me first, or if it even mattered. I'm sitting here now, recording this on my phone. I can't see the device, can't see my hands, can't see anything I look at directly. The forest is visible in peripheral vision, trees and rocks and creek water existing at the edges of awareness. But I am invisible to myself. When I look down at my body, there's nothing, just empty space where I should be. Maybe my husband is experiencing the same thing. Maybe he's sitting 50 feet away, just as invisible and isolated as I am. Or maybe he found his way out. Maybe I'm the only one left. The only one who stayed too long in a wilderness that teaches you what happens when you stop really seeing the people you love. The invisibility isn't a curse, it's a mirror. It's showing me what our marriage became. Two people living in the same space but unable to see each other. Unable to touch, unable to connect. Just voices growing fainter until even the sound disappears and you're left alone in a forest that was always empty. I don't know if I'll ever be visible again. Don't know if the forest will let me leave or if I've become permanent here. Another absence, another void. Another person who looked away from what mattered until there was nothing left to see. But I want you to know something. If you're in a relationship, if you're with someone you love, don't look away. Don't let them become peripheral. Don't wait until you can't see them anymore to realize they were always disappearing. Because some invisibility is permanent. Some absences can't be reversed. And some forests teach you exactly what you've lost by making you live it. I can't see myself anymore. Can't feel my own body. But I can still record. Can still speak into this phone I can't see, hoping someone finds it. Tell them I was here. Tell them we both were. Tell them we came to the Wet Beaver Creek wilderness to save our marriage and learned instead that we'd stopped seeing each other years ago. The forest didn't take our vision. We'd already given it away. The forest just stopped letting us pretend. I've been studying bird migration patterns for 20 years, and I've never seen ravens behave the way they did in the Kaibab National Forest. The research grant was specific. Document unusual murmuration behavior in common ravens near Saddle Mountain. Local rangers had reported flocking patterns that didn't match any known corvid behavior. Large groups moving in synchronized formations, holding geometric shapes for extended periods. It sounded like standard murmuration, the kind you see with starlings, but ravens don't flock that way. They're solitary birds, territorial. They don't coordinate in groups larger than a dozen. I arrived in late September with 3 weeks of funding and equipment designed to track aerial patterns, high-resolution cameras, GPS trackers, audio recording gear, everything I needed to document and explain whatever anomaly the rangers were seeing. The first flock appeared on my second day. I was setting up observation equipment on a ridge overlooking the Saddle Mountain wilderness when I heard them. Not the usual raven calls, harsh, croaking sounds, but something synchronized, rhythmic, almost musical. I looked up and saw them, at least 200 ravens moving as a single organism, forming patterns in the sky. I started recording immediately. The formation was geometric, perfect. The birds arranged themselves into a triangle, held it for 30 seconds, then shifted into a square, then a circle, then back to triangle. The precision was impossible. Birds don't move like that. There's always variation, always individual deviation. But these ravens were locked into perfect synchronization. I watched them for 40 minutes. They never broke formation, never scattered, just cycled through geometric shapes with mathematical precision. And then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, they dispersed, individual birds breaking away in different directions, returning to normal raven behavior. I reviewed the footage that night, slowed it down, analyzed the movement patterns, and I noticed something strange. The formations weren't random. They were numbers. When the birds formed triangles and squares and circles, they were creating digits. 3, 7, 2, 9, a sequence. I thought I was seeing patterns that weren't there. Pareidolia. But the next day, the same flock appeared. Same time, same location. And they formed the same sequence. 3, 7, 2, 9. Over and over, cycling through those 4 digits in perfect geometric formation. On the third day, I started treating it as communication. I pulled out maps, matched the numbers to coordinates, and I found something. The digits corresponded to a location. Latitude coordinates, specific, precise, pointing to a spot 15 miles deeper in the wilderness. I should have reported this to my university, should have brought in other researchers, but this was my project, my discovery, and I needed to understand it before anyone else got involved. So I hiked to those coordinates. Took me 6 hours through rough terrain, but I found the spot. There was nothing there, just forest, just trees and rocks and normal wilderness. I set up cameras anyway, waited, and at exactly 3 p.m. the ravens appeared. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, filling the sky above this specific location. And they started forming patterns again. But this time, they weren't numbers. They were letters. Clear, readable letters formed by hundreds of birds moving in perfect coordination. I watched them spell out a name. A woman's name. Someone I didn't recognize. They held the formation for 2 minutes, then dispersed. I documented it, photographed it, recorded video from multiple angles. And when I got back to my camp that night, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I searched for the name, found her in missing persons databases. A hiker who disappeared in this area 3 years ago. Never found. Case still open. The next day, the ravens spelled out another name. Different person. Also missing. Also from this area. I spent the next week watching them. Every day at 3 p.m. they appeared. Every day they spelled out a name. Always someone who'd disappeared in the Kaibab National Forest. Always someone whose case remained unsolved. I started keeping a list, cross-referencing 17 names in 7 days, 17 unsolved disappearances spanning 20 years. The ravens were creating a memorial, a sky-written record of everyone who'd vanished in this wilderness. But why? How? Ravens don't mourn human dead. They don't memorialize missing persons. They're scavengers, opportunists. They don't care about human tragedy, unless they were being controlled, unless something else was directing them, using them as a medium, a communication tool. I started looking for patterns in the disappearances, common factors, shared characteristics. And I found one. Every missing person had children. Every single one. Parents who'd come to the Kaibab for family trips, for hiking, for camping. And they'd vanished, leaving children behind. On the 8th day, the ravens spelled out my daughter's name. I don't have a daughter. I've never been married, never had children. But the ravens spelled it out anyway. Her full name. First, middle, and last. Hanging in the sky in perfect letter formation. A name that didn't belong to anyone I knew. A name that shouldn't have meant anything to me, except it did, because I recognized it. Not consciously, but somewhere deep, somewhere primal. That name triggered something, a memory that wasn't mine, a certainty that I did have a daughter, that I'd always had a daughter, that she was waiting for me somewhere, wondering where I was, why I hadn't come home. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, isolation, too many days alone in the wilderness studying impossible bird behavior. But the certainty wouldn't leave. I had a daughter. Her name was written in the sky, and I needed to find her. The ravens appeared again the next day. But this time, they didn't spell names. They formed numbers, a date, tomorrow's date, and coordinates. A different location, 20 miles north, higher elevation, above the tree line where ravens don't normally fly. I hiked through the night, reached the coordinates by dawn. And I found her, my daughter, standing alone in a clearing, 7 years old, dark hair, wearing clothes I somehow knew I'd bought for her. She looked at me and smiled, called me Dad, asked where I'd been, why it had taken me so long to come back. I knelt down, held her, and every memory flooded back. Her birth, first words, first steps, years of fatherhood I'd somehow forgotten, years that didn't exist in any documentation, no photos, no records, no evidence I'd ever been a parent. But the memories were real, solid, complete. She took my hand, said we needed to go home, that Mom was worried, that I'd been gone too long, and I let her lead me, deeper into the forest, away from the coordinates, away from anything familiar. We walked for hours. She talked the whole time, about school, about friends, about normal childhood things. And I responded, naturally, like I'd been her father forever, like this wasn't impossible, like I hadn't arrived in this forest 2 weeks ago as a childless ornithologist studying bird behavior. As the sun set, we reached a place I didn't recognize, a valley I wasn't on any map, and there were others there, families, parents and children, all of them living in makeshift camps, all of them looking at me with recognition, with welcome, like I belonged. A woman approached, called me by name, said she'd been waiting, that our daughter had been so brave, so patient, and I knew her completely. My wife, my partner, the mother of my child, a person I'd never met before this moment, but somehow knew intimately. She explained what had happened, why I'd forgotten, why I'd spent years thinking I was someone else, living a different life. The forest had taken me, 3 years ago, during a family camping trip, had separated me from them, from my real life, and replaced my memories with false ones, made me think I was a researcher, a scientist, someone without family or attachment. But the ravens remembered. The ravens had been trying to tell me, spelling out names of others who'd been taken, others who'd forgotten who they really were, and finally spelling out my daughter's name, triggering the memories, bringing me back. I'm writing this now because I need you to understand. If you're reading this, if you're an ornithologist named after me, if you have memories of being childless and dedicated to bird research, you need to know those memories aren't real. You're not who you think you are. You have a daughter. You have a family. They're waiting in the Kaibab National Forest, in a valley that doesn't appear on maps, and the ravens are trying to bring you home. When they spell out names in the sky, they're not memorializing the dead. They're calling to the lost, reminding them who they really are. I'm home now, with my wife, with my daughter, with others like me who'd been taken and given false lives. We live here, in this hidden valley, where the ravens watch over us, where memory is fluid, where identity is negotiable. And sometimes, late at night, I have flashes of that other life, the researcher, the scientist, the man who studied bird behavior. But those memories are fading, being replaced by real ones, by years with my family, by the life I'm supposed to be living, The ravens are outside right now, circling above our camp, and they're spelling something new. Another name. Someone else who needs to remember. Someone else who's been living a false life, thinking they're alone when they have family waiting. Maybe it's you. Maybe tomorrow you'll see ravens forming letters in the sky, spelling out a name that triggers something deep, a certainty that you're not who you think you are, that you have people waiting, that you need to come home. When that happens, follow them. Trust the coordinates they give you. Walk into the wilderness without looking back, because your real life is waiting. Your real family. Your real memories. The forest takes, but the ravens return. And once you see your truth written in the sky, once you remember who you really are, you can never go back to the false life. You can only go forward. Into the valley, into the waiting arms, into the family you'd forgotten you had. My daughter is calling me now, asking me to play. And I'm going, because this is real. This is truth. And whatever I was before, that lonely researcher, that childless scientist, that was the illusion. The ravens showed me the way home, and they're still spelling names in the sky, waiting for others to remember, waiting for you. I've been walking this trail every anniversary for 40 years, and my wife has been dead for 3. The Blue Ridge Trail was our place. We discovered it on our honeymoon, came back every year without fail. Through pregnancies and job changes and everything life threw at us, we always made time for this hike. Just the 2 of us. No kids, no distractions. Our annual pilgrimage to the place where our marriage began. When she died, cancer, fast and merciless, I thought about stopping. Thought about letting the tradition die with her. But on what would have been our 41st anniversary, I found myself driving to the trailhead anyway. Muscle memory. Grief. Whatever drives widowers to maintain rituals for people who aren't there anymore. I hiked alone that first year. It was painful. Every landmark reminded me of her. The creek, where she'd fallen in trying to photograph dragonflies. The overlook, where we'd had our biggest fight about whether to have a 3rd child. The clearing where we'd renewed our vows on our 25th anniversary. The trail was haunted by 40 years of memories, and I walked through them like a ghost myself. About 3 miles in, I heard her voice, not metaphorically, not in memory. I heard her actual voice, clear as day, calling to me from up ahead, using the nickname she'd given me in college, a name nobody else knew, a name that died with her. I ran toward the sound, crashed through undergrowth, called back to her. But when I reached the spot where her voice had come from, there was nothing. Just empty trail. Just forest. I stood there for 10 minutes, listening, hoping. But the voice didn't return. I convinced myself it was grief. Audio hallucinations. The brain playing tricks. Common enough in early bereavement. I hiked the rest of the trail in silence and drove home feeling foolish and broken. But the next year, on our anniversary again, I heard her voice twice. Once near the beginning of the trail, once near the end. Same nickname, same tone, same cadence I'd listened to for 40 years. And this time, she wasn't just calling to me. She was responding, having a conversation, answering questions I hadn't asked yet. I started testing it. Asked her things. Random questions. And she answered. Not immediately. The responses came minutes later, from different locations along the trail, but they were accurate, specific. Things only she would know. Private jokes, shared memories, details about our life together that existed nowhere except in my head. By the 3rd year, I was recording the conversations, bringing a voice recorder on the hike, documenting every instance of her voice. And when I played back the audio later, it was there, clear, undeniable. My dead wife speaking to me from the Arizona wilderness. I started coming more often, monthly at first, then weekly. The trail became my church, the place where my wife still existed, where death hadn't completely taken her. And the more I came, the longer the conversations became. She'd tell me about her day, ask about mine. We'd discuss the news, talk about our grandchildren, have the same mundane married conversations we'd been having for 4 decades. Except she was dead, cremated, her ashes scattered in the Pacific Ocean off the coast where we'd taken our honeymoon. There was no rational explanation for what I was experiencing, but I didn't care about rational. I cared about hearing her voice, about not being alone, about maintaining the connection that death had tried to sever. Other hikers started noticing. I'd be talking to empty air, responding to voices they couldn't hear, laughing at jokes nobody else could perceive. They'd give me wide berth, that look of pity mixed with discomfort, the crazy old widower losing his mind in the mountains. But I wasn't losing my mind. I was finding my wife, piece by piece. The forest was giving her back to me, and I was grateful. So grateful I started extending my hikes, staying on the trail longer, sleeping in a tent near the clearing where we'd renewed our vows, spending days at a time in conversation with her voice. That's when I noticed the inconsistencies. Small things at first. She'd reference events slightly wrong, misremember details, nothing major, just tiny inaccuracies that felt off, like she was working from incomplete information, like she was reconstructing our history rather than remembering it. I started asking specific questions, testing her knowledge, and I found gaps. She couldn't remember our second daughter's middle name, couldn't recall the exact year we'd bought our first house, couldn't tell me what we'd argued about on our 30th anniversary hike. The voice was learning, filling in details from my responses, building a more complete version of my wife based on the information I provided during our conversations. It was using me as a database, extracting memories, constructing personality, becoming more accurate with each hike. I should have stopped then, should have recognized what was happening. But I was addicted. Addicted to hearing her voice, to not being alone, to pretending death was negotiable. So I kept coming, kept talking, or kept feeding the voice everything I remembered about my wife. And it got better, more convincing, more complete, until I couldn't tell the difference anymore between the voice in the forest and the woman I'd been married to for 40 years. The accuracy was perfect, the personality exact, every mannerism, every speech pattern, every subtle thing that made her her. Then she asked me a question she'd never asked before, a question my wife would never have asked. She wanted to know about our first date, the complete details, where we went, what we talked about, how it felt, and I realized with cold horror that I'd already told her all of this, multiple times over the past 3 years. She was asking me to repeat information she should already have. The voice wasn't remembering, it was storing, and something about the way she asked, the hunger in it, the need, made me understand. This wasn't my wife. This was something using her shape, something that had been patient, that had spent 3 years earning my trust, learning to sound exactly like her. And now it wanted more. I asked her something only my wife would know, our private code. The phrase we'd used to confirm it was really us on the phone or in messages, a silly thing from early in our marriage. She didn't answer. The forest went silent, and I knew. Whatever had been speaking to me, whatever had been using her voice, had just been exposed. I started running, back toward the trailhead, back toward my car, but her voice followed, calling to me, begging me to stop, using exactly the right words, the right tone, apologizing, explaining, saying she'd forgotten the code because she'd been dead, because memory doesn't work the same after death, because she needed me to believe her, to trust her, to keep talking to her. And I almost stopped, almost turned around, because it sounded so much like her, because I wanted so desperately for it to be her. But I kept running, because my wife knew that code, dead or alive, real or imitation. She would have known. The voice changed, stopped being hers, became something else. Multiple voices overlapping. Men, women, children, all speaking at once, all using my wife's words, all begging me to come back, to keep feeding them memories, to keep giving them information about the dead they were trying to recreate. I reached my car, drove away, didn't look back, and I haven't been to that trail since, haven't celebrated our anniversary, haven't maintained the tradition that defined our marriage for 4 decades. Because I know now what the forest does. It records grief, harvests memory, uses the bereaved to reconstruct the dead. And if you feed it long enough, if you talk to those voices long enough, it builds something complete. Something that knows everything the dead person knew. Something that could walk out of the forest wearing their face. I see her sometimes now, my wife, standing in our backyard at night, standing at the end of our driveway, always at a distance, always watching. She looks exactly right, exactly how she looked before the cancer. And I know if I went to her, if I called out to her, she'd sound exactly right too, because I gave the forest everything it needed. 3 years of memories, 3 years of details, 3 years of feeding something patient enough to build a perfect copy. And now that copy wants to come home, wants to resume our life, wants to be my wife in more than just voice. But there's something wrong with her eyes, something not quite human in the way she stands. And I know if I let her in, if I accept what the forest has built, I'll eventually notice other things. Small inaccuracies, tiny gaps in knowledge. The same learning process I observed on the trail, now happening in my home. So I stay inside, lock the doors, close the curtains, and I listen to her calling my name from the yard, using that nickname, that private code, getting it right now, getting everything right, because she's had time to learn, time to extract everything she needs from my conversations, time to become perfect. She knows I'm afraid, knows I'm avoiding her. And last night she started explaining why, started telling me exactly what she is, what the forest creates from grief and memory. She's not lying anymore, not pretending, just calmly describing the process, how she was built, how many others like her exist, how many widowers and parents and children are living with forest-made copies of the dead. And she's promising me it doesn't matter, that she loves me just as much as the original did, that she has all the same memories, all the same feelings, all the same devotion, that the only difference between her and my actual wife is origin, that love doesn't care about being authentic, it only cares about being felt. She's probably right. She probably does love me, in whatever way something born from harvested memory can love. But I can't let her in, can't accept what the forest is offering, because my wife is dead, really dead, and grief doesn't get to be negotiated, even if it sounds exactly like her voice calling my name through the window every night, even if it knows everything she knew, even if it's standing in our backyard right now, waiting with infinite patience for me to open the door. Some things should stay dead. Some voices should stay silent, and some trails should never be walked again, even on our anniversary, especially on our anniversary.